Classical liberal thinkers and the early economists, people like John Locke,
Ooh, yes, John Locke, John Stuart Mill.
Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, and Adam Smith, they're all progressivists. They all agreed that human.
You know what's so annoying for a lot of Muslims is that these people who are some of the key figures in making these ideas more popular and more nuanced. Okay, first of all, they're not the founders of it. These ideas predated them, but they made them a lot more popular and a lot more advanced, and they helped make them a lot more mainstream. So we owe a lot to them. We do owe a lot to them, but we do not, because we're not like dogmatic, we do not see these people as saints. We do not see them as as godly divine figures that we worship or revere in some dogmatic cultish way. So it's really hard. Like they wish like we had, like if we had a Jesus, or it would be easier to go after us. But because we see these people
Like John Locke,
like we see these as like, because we have to be grateful to these people, but they also had a lot of crappy ideas that we don't shy away from criticizing. And we also know that their ideas that they promoted and that we owe them for has become a lot better and a lot more nuanced since they've introduced it. So we do not have to go back to everything they said. I mean, we do go back to them because there is still a lot there that we could appreciate, but we don't have to rely on them, right? A lot of their ideas were promoted based on the assumption that these are like God-given rights or gifted by nature or ordained by nature or something like rights or stuff like. But we don't need that anymore because we have data to show that the rights that they promoted, they just work. We could use the scientific method, method to show that these rights and these ideas work, instead of like relying on their methods. So we could be grateful to them while not relying on them. But this makes the job of people who are against Enlightenment values very difficult, because we don't have the saints or gods or the prophets or the imams that they do, that they see as flawless or masoom in a way that we could easily shut down, because they were terrible human beings. Their prophets, their gods, their saints were terrible. They were so flawed that makes them worshiping them, even when they act like they're not worshiping them, makes that so easy for us to like, oh, we just have to look at Muhammad. We just look at Muhammad's life, and it's just like, are you serious? Are you serious? This is your prophet? But we don't have figures that we see as flawless. So because the liberal method is a self-correcting method, rather than acting like it's perfect, it actually admits that it has flaws, and it constantly comes up with methods to correct its own flaws. It's so difficult for them to, because they keep pointing at flaws and like, yeah, we know. Yeah, there's flaws. We figured these flaws. The liberal process, the scientific method, the liberal world figured out these problems before. The only reason why it's so easy for you to show these problems is because the liberal world detected them before you. We know these problems. These, so, and these people they like, oh, look at this. John Stuart Mill, John Locke had this problematic idea. Yeah, we don't endorse them 100%. They said this and that's wrong. Well, screw that. Screw them for saying that. We're not going to buy everything they say. They're not like, we don't believe in the cults of person. We don't worship these people. These guys are not our saints. We just took some of their great ideas and we ran with it, right? But they try to think, they want to go after these people. They want to introduce these people as our saints and prophets, and then shut them down because they did have some problematic views. So this is exactly, there's the two different methods, okay? They go look at the liberal world and find every problem that they could, and we're like, oh, look, they go to their ideas like, look at the problems with the liberal world. They don't tell them that these problems have been reduced, and the fact that the liberal world is addressing these problems by itself. And then they go look at, because the religious people, they have this idea like, well, who is their prophet? Who's their God? Their mind works in that way. They go and introduce these people as our prophets and our gods and our saints, and like, well, look, they were flawed. And that they try to bring down this entire movement, this entire process, because the people who introduced them or the people people who popularized them, they were flawed as well, and they used as a method to shoot down the entire system. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work because the liberal process is already self-correcting. They cannot comprehend a methodology that admits its own faults, because what they have is dogma, and dogma cannot even admit that there's anything wrong about it. So it's incomprehensible for a lot of them.
Locke, John Stuart Mill, Jeremy Bentham, and Adam Smith, they're all progressivists. They all agreed that human happiness was tied to more goods and services, and more goods and services would eventually bring human freedom, equality, and ultimately utopia. Communist thinkers were no different. In fact,
communist thinkers are anti-enlightenment. Guys, none of these people reduce everything about human happiness to just goods and services. And goods and services are not inherently wrong. Okay, they're not inherently wrong. Okay, I mean, the Khadija was a trader, and Muhammad, he was a shepherd, and then he became a trader. So he did goods and services as well. I mean, I don't understand what's wrong with goods and services. They keep saying that as if that's something evil. But none of these people suggested that everything about human happiness could be reduced to goods and services.
Progressivists.
I mean, even if they did, they didn't. But if they did, we would just be like, yeah, that's wrong.
They all agreed that human happiness.
Yeah, this is such a straw man. No, none of them. Okay, tied to. Okay, see, this is why it's not reduced to, but it's tied to. But how could it not be tied to that? Like, this is such a loose, vague term. Okay, so here's a clever, actually, thing you do. That human happiness is tied to goods and services. I mean, as opposed to what? Of course, it's like the whole world runs on trade and people do working and providing good. Like, I think, like, you say tied to goods and services, hoping that your audience is hearing reduced to nothing but goods and services. Because if you are suggesting that it's reduced to nothing but goods and services, then none of these thinkers suggested that, and nobody in their right mind is suggesting that. But I think this is the impression that you want the audience to get by saying tied to. But if you're actually just saying tied to, then how is it not tied to? I mean, what are you going to do if you're hungry? What are you going to do? Like, don't you want services? Like, services as, like, what? Like, services, like, I mean, even in Islam, it tells you, like, oh, you should be working. You should be providing goods and services. Like, somebody in Islam, there's hadith that if you're not providing goods and services, then you're wasting your life. That's Islam. It's in Islam that you shouldn't be like, Muhammad was like, there's hadith of Muhammad saying, like, oh, what do you do for a living? And somebody was like, oh, my brother makes money and I just live off of that. And Muhammad was like, yeah, that's not good. You should be working, right? So that's, even in Islam, is like, yeah, goods and services. I mean, having providing, not just making goods and services, providing goods and services makes you feel like you're living if you like your job, if you like what you're providing to society, what goods and services you're creating, if you're an artist and you make art, and that's a service that you're providing, and you're happy, like, look at the art that I just made, and you feel like your life is meaningful because of the things that you're making. I mean, how is your happiness not tied to the goods and services that you're creating? And then you make money off of it, and you're proud of the money that you made, because, and if you manage to keep going down this path, we're going to be able to create a society where more people are proud of the jobs that they have, and proud of the money that they're making, and proud of the things that they get to buy with the money that they're making because they worked hard for it. And we're proud of that. No, but but tied to is such a vague term that what do you mean by that? Of course, it's going to have some connection to it. Can you come up with can you provide an alternative society where happiness is completely independent from goods and services? Completely? And if it's not completely independent, then it's going to be somehow tied to it. But it's not reduced to it, but it is somehow tied to it.
happiness was tied to more goods and services, and more goods and services would eventually bring.
Yeah, and also Oli is very good point. Yeah, reject materialism but expect material rewards in an afterlife. They're criticizing us for the same calculations they're making in their mind, but in two worlds instead of one. Okay, like you guys are making this calculation on how to be happy in this one world, as opposed to us who are making the exact same calculation but in two worlds instead of one. You're making the same calculation on how to maximize your happiness. You're doing the same thing. You're just under the illusion that there's a second one, and your calculation just is in two worlds instead of one world.
Human freedom, equality, and ultimately utopia. Communist thinkers were no different. In fact,
no, they were very different. The communist thinkers are illiberal.
Communism as a materialist philosophy fully agrees that human happiness and freedom can only come from more and more goods and services.
No, it's not only. Okay, so only, no, okay, more freedom, more, oh my God, no, it's not just more goods and services. Who is suggesting that? I mean, I'm not going to defend. So if you're saying that I'm not going to defend the communists, but the people who you said they're exactly the same. So you're saying about the promoters of liberal values as well. Who said? Show me who said it's only from that. Who said it's only from that?
Freedom can only come from more and more goods and services.
In fact, if you study these people, they're saying, right, they admit that the only thing right now we could measure is goods and services, but they admit that this is a flawed measurement because those thinkers were if you actually study those thinkers, they were suggesting that, hey, we're going to go with goods and services because we could measure it, but this is a flawed method because obviously there are other ways that people are getting happy, but unfortunately we can't put a number on that because it's immeasurable at this moment. Okay, they were like I don't know, the happiness that you get when it comes to holding your daughter's hand on the beach and running in the morning with your daughter, and you're feeling the sun and you're feeling the sand in between your toes, and then somebody called, breakfast is ready, and then you guys run towards this, and you pick up your daughter and you put her on your shoulder and you run towards, and this memory that is being made. Yeah, we can't measure that. Okay, so that happiness is there. That's like a beautiful memory that is going to get stuck in the head of your daughters forever, and that's a happiness that is there. And that's not goods and services. Okay, you didn't pay for that, and nobody delivered that service to you, and that happiness is there somehow stuck in your daughter's brain forever. And yeah, we can't measure that. Okay, but we can measure more people being able to afford more goods, more people having access to healthcare, more people having access to more calories, more people having access to more clean water. We can measure those things. Is it a perfect measuring system? No, it's not. But we're going to measure what we can measure. And you know who admits that this is not a perfect measuring tool? The same people that are measuring this. All right, it's like, hey, your happiness is somehow relevant to the fact that you're not starving to death. We're not saying it's everything, but hey, you're not starving to death. So being able to measure how healthy you are, being able to measure how much exercise you're getting, being able to measure how much food you have access to, how much goods and services you can afford. We're going to go with that because it's better than working with zero data at all. Okay? So yeah, it's not all goods and services, but we're going to measure what we can measure. When we figure out a way to measure you having a quiet moment with your son before bedtime, when you're reading him a story, okay, when we figure out a way to measure the happiness, we're going to measure that as well. But right now, we're going to go with what we can measure. And it's better than guessing, better than working with zero information. Yeah. Qasim is saying all heaven promises are materialistic. We are making world better than their SHITTY heaven with 72. Hey, don't. No, those versions are okay. Fat ASS version Huris. Okay, first of all, some people like their version who is fat, and that's okay. Okay, in heaven, you don't have to worry about diabetes or anything like that. Okay, so don't fat shame people in heaven. I mean, don't fat shame people anywhere, but especially in heaven, because I'm pretty sure there's no health concerns in heaven. Anyways, never mind. Let's continue.
The communist only disagrees with his liberal counterpart on how best to achieve and distribute those goods and services, but the underlying materialism is the same. Does non-stop consumption lead to freedom and happiness?
I really like it how is this anti-liberal Islam apologists have jumped on the bandwagon of consumption bad. It's like, guys, we don't have anything against liberalism. Let's jump on this. Like, let's just go find the literature of all these people, all the wokey lefty people. It's so interesting because these people, they hate the illiberal left because of their whole pro-trans, pro-gay agenda, but they're like, well, I mean, they have the best literature against liberalism, so let's just steal their work. Okay, so they're like, consumption is bad. Like, I'm telling you, for the past 1400 years, Islam had nothing anti-consumption or anti-market or anti-consumerism or anti-goods and services. There's nothing there that was against any of this in the past 1400 years. But liberalism has made the world so much better, and these people are so desperate to find something against it. And Islam produces nothing anti-liberal values, anything that you use it. So they're just going and they're stealing other people's work, right? They're like, guys, what do we do? Like, we're gonna blame, consumerism. Yes, let's pretend like Islam is anti-consumerism for some goddamn reason, because we have nothing against these liberal values. When was Islam anti-consumerism? Ever. Islam had a market for slaves. If Islam was a thing, you would be buying slaves on eBay right now.
Yes. Sure, some aspects of happiness can be put in consumer terms like food, shelter, the basic needs of life, but most human happiness doesn't depend on products. The happiness that comes from a loving and committed relationship with the opposite sex, the happiness that comes...
Wait, what? I'm telling you, they're stealing anti-liberal people. He's reading a lot of, he's reading a lot of wokey stuff.
Human happiness doesn't depend on product.
This is such a straw man. Imagine thinking like, enlightenment values. The liberal world is telling you that all happiness comes from, it depends on products. It's just all products. It's just no. The fact is that this whole first of all, people are trying to get their happiness from material goods predates capitalism. Okay, do you think Muhammad, if whoever Muhammad's stories are based on, do you think when he became all of a sudden powerful and all like, oh my God, I'm enjoying, like, I really love being able to get all this booty from war. This is like, yay, look at all these beautiful slaves that I have access to right now, right? Do you think they didn't enjoy that? Do you think like the Pope, do you think pre-liberal thinkers, people didn't enjoy bigger castles, more jewelry, more access to everything? You think like depend on products? This is not a problem with the liberal world or liberalism. Okay, this is how, I mean, since cavemen. Okay, you're like, this is my cave, and if you try to steal my cave, I'm gonna smash your brain with a rock. Okay, so this is like, oh, this is my bone. It's my, so it was always there. People liked more things. People wanted to have more things. Okay, this has nothing to do with the liberal world. In fact, what liberalism is doing is actively figuring out ways that you don't have to be dependent, like more ways where people could find more fulfilling lives. Okay, more meaningful lives, happier lives, less dependent on products, less dependent on finding ways to be happier, on less finding ways to find meaning and purpose on the work you're doing. We're becoming more independent from, just collecting. Like, guys, the idea of owning, like, I'm owning less and being happy, finding ways to find joys in life. Like, these solutions are available to you. People are writing books about them. There's YouTube videos about them. Some people are taking it to, like, if you look at it on YouTube right now, like, oh, extreme minimalism, extreme minimalist techniques. So, like, okay, this is going a lot too far. Like, people on YouTube are bragging about, the only thing I own is this bowl and this bag and my phone and nothing else. Brag about it. Like, and people shaming it, like, like, you're like, people are like, oh, you have a party during COVID and most people can't party. How dare you? And people are like piling up on this celebrity because he had a party during lockdown. Like, all of this is being highlighted more in the liberal world, right? Like, this is like, people are like finding, like, how could I live on a budget? How do I do budgeting? How can I make delicious food with this income? Like, all of these new ways of people finding out to live happy lives. Oh, how do I start a career in this? Like, how can I work from home? How can I spend more time with my family and work from home? Like, all of these new methods, all of these new possibilities, all of these new ways of living is becoming available because of the liberal world. Like, because of, oh my God, it's just this. This is the straw man to suggest that the liberal world is even suggesting that you need to depend on products to be happy. This is like the only way that they could take it down, because they have to make it seem so ridiculously dumb for them to be able to shoot it, okay, to shoot it down, because they cannot deny, they cannot go after everything that the liberal world has been able to produce and give to you. They cannot go after it, so they have to do these strawman techniques.
And subscribe, everyone! Every single one of you is watching. Subscribe, do it now! Do it now!